Hey, everybody. Welcome to an impromptu live stream that we are going to do where we will watch Joe Biden's press conference live. I was not going to do this. This is last minute, mostly because Joe Biden has already screwed up. He was ending the NATO portion of his duties, and in the big moment, this whole NATO event was about Ukraine, specifically about reaffirming that Ukraine has a path into NATO, reaffirming that NATO will support Ukraine. And so, since America leads NATO, President Biden does a big introduction for Volodymyr Zelensky, except he calls him President Putin. Oofa doofa. Not great, Bob. Not great. And so, if we already are there, then what do you say we go ahead and watch? We are getting word now that it is going to be delayed until 7 o'clock Eastern time. That is 6 Central time. And so let's go ahead and watch that clip. This was earlier. Here we go. Well, how about this?
Hand it over to the president.
There we go.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Now, for the record, to be fair, he did immediately correct himself. Zelensky made a joke about it. But obviously, look, we're in tense times right now when it comes to old Joe. Every single word that falls out of the man's mouth is going to be scrutinized. That's just the reality of it. That's the story. So I guess if we've got time, let's update ourselves and on where the story is. Yes, that was today. That was literally about a half hour ago. So, Clooney, I assumed that Biden daring all of the elected Democrats to do something about it and nobody stepping up in big numbers was the end of this. Glide path back to Democratic harmony. No, indeed, the emperor does have new clothes. You didn't just see Joe Biden sack. But no, this is continuing. And not only do you now have one senator out and out on the record for real, I wrote a guest piece in the Washington Post, a senator from Vermont, saying that Biden should step down. But you got Michael Bennet in Colorado, another 2020 rival of Biden. Eagle-eyed listeners and viewers will remember. But he said he believes Donald Trump's going to win in a landslide. You had a good poll come out for Biden today showing that they were still tied. But then George Clooney. Oh, the Cloonster. Batman himself says to Joe Biden's chances, we in a tight spot. Because we have now had, by the way, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about cheap fakes, right? Y'all remember cheap fakes? Anybody? Anybody remember cheap fakes? The cheap fakes controversy surrounded 3 different incidents. One, where he was in France for D-Day, and it looked like he was trying to sit in a chair that wasn't there. One at the G7 summit, where he was meandering around giving a thumbs up to paratroopers instead of a photo op with all the other world leaders and Rishi Sunak. And then a Juneteenth celebration where it appeared that he froze up while everybody else was dancing. Those were combined together and called cheap fakes. Maliciously edited videos designed to reinforce an unfair Republican trope that Joe Biden might be in some medical state. We now have firsthand reporting from all 3 of those events. From all 3 of those events. George Clooney. I forgot one. One of them was Obama helping Joe Biden off the stage. We have George Clooney saying, yeah, I was there. I was backstage. He looks as terrible backstage at that fundraiser as he did on stage during the debate. We had reporting today about the Juneteenth thing. People were wondering what was going on with him. And now we have leaders from the D-Day summit saying, yeah, he was an embarrassment, man. He was trying to sit in a chair that wasn't there. Yes, but George Clooney is elite. I mean, here's the worry. The worry is that Joe Biden said he was a bridge president. We just didn't know it was the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. That's the problem. Then this reporting today from CNN. Joe Biden hasn't held a cabinet meeting since October of last year. By the way, this press conference he's going to do, this will be his first this year, since July. The reporting says that Joe Biden does not have actual cabinet meetings. They are essentially rehearsed performances that each secretary submits what they would like to tell the president. That is then reviewed by the president's staff. And then when they sit together in a room, they just kind of go through the things that they have already submitted. And that's that. That's why no one ever gets fired. If that's true, and we don't know it's true, but let's say it's true, that's why no one gets fired. Because every cabinet secretary is essentially a warlord for that part of our government. And it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter if they've done a good job or a bad job. None of these dudes are getting fired, ever. Because there's a question of whether or not the president even knows about it. There's a thing that I've noticed happens whenever people talk about Joe Biden behind the scenes, where they say, just the other day, he was asking me a bunch of questions I didn't know the answer to. I had to go back and get them. That, according to other reporting, is also the thing that he yells at people about. He will find a thing, he will ask about some random thing that you don't know about, yell at you that you're an idiot, that you don't know about it, and then make you come back and give him the right answer. But if you are essentially then just all the rest of the time doing whatever the hell you want, and he's asleep at the wheel, well, I mean, what are we doing? Coming in late. So we are waiting for Joe Biden to speak here. He will be doing his first press conference of the year. Let's make sure that we're not late. Is it true that Mayor Pete is using the Motor Vehicle Bill and National Voters Act to register illegals and refugees who get state-issued IDs and driver's documents so liberal cities can cast their ballots to rig elections? I do not know. I'm not sure. I don't know if that is the case. Well, look, here's the problem for Biden is that the later this thing goes, the more we're moving into gremlin hours. Like, you don't want to get too far into the gremlin hours if you're Biden. Why wouldn't Kamala run a real cabinet meeting? Because she's not the president of the United States. That's why. The president of the United States runs the cabinet. I would assume that you would probably meet semi-regularly. Barring a heavy travel schedule, you should probably be meeting weekly with your secretaries. Right? I would think so. I think weekly would be a good... You're running the presidency, right? Now, if it's an insane travel schedule, then maybe you do some, reports and stuff like that, and you just get briefed on it. But in general, I don't know, weekly. I don't know, my boss delegates shit to me all the time. Yeah, it's true. It's a pretty complicated business running the United States of America. All right, maybe weekly's over the top. How about monthly? That you meet with your cabinet? Monthly? I mean, is that crazy? Monthly? I don't think that's crazy. Yeah, let's how often do presidents hold cabinet meetings? Because I don't know. Maybe they do only happen once every 6 months. Are public cabinet meetings just for show? 100%. They are just for show. Now they're there to show that you're holding a meeting, which I didn't realize I would really want. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to do a little bit more research to see exactly how often that kind of stuff went. We are getting now some of the technical buzzing around the podium, so I assume that we are going to get this at the top of the hour. Oh yeah, October 2nd was Joe Biden's last cabinet meeting. 5 days before October 7th of 2023. For those of you who are not aware, that was a thing that kicked off another thing that is still thinging. Bi-weekly cabinet meetings are typical. So twice monthly, go Royals. Yeah, if Obama did them once a quarter, I mean, that would make sense. Once a quarter. Yeah, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Fortnightly? Are you doing a cabinet meeting fortnightly? Of course, this has gotten a lot of attention for being the big boy press conference that was coined by Karine Jean-Pierre. A big boy press conference. This will be Joe Biden's first of the year, where he will take unscripted questions from the press. Now, then again, unscripted has to be thrown in quotes because we have seen, I mean, this is not a Joe Biden thing. This is just in general a president thing, that the press secretary will work with certain reporters that they know that they'll say, okay, well, are you thinking about asking a question about blank? It's like, all right, he'll call on you first. Just ask the question that we want you to ask. How long do we think he'll go? All right, let's set the over-under. Let's set the over-under here. The minimum's got to be 15. Minimum's got to be 15. So let's start. We're going to start the over-under at 21 and a half minutes. 21 and a half minutes. This is just how long from his first syllable at the podium to him walking away from the podium. 21 and a half minutes. Do you go over or under? Over or under that? Will it be shorter than 21 and a half minutes or longer than 21 and a half minutes? So you guys are pounding the unders. I would take the over. I would take the over. I don't think he goes, I don't think he goes an hour, but I think he would hope to be podcast length. Podcast length, it's like, you want to get over 15 no matter what, or else what's the point of listening? 30 minutes is a good short podcast. An hour is probably the length you want to be if you're actually trying to think about it. And then if you've got a really good popular show where people just want more and more and more of it, then go more than that. he can go down a rabbit hole with a long story. Yeah, that's true. That's true. My dad said, Joey. This from Jake Tapper on Twitter. I think there's this is according to a longtime Biden advisor. I think there's an unfortunate inevitability to all this. I'm sad because I have known him a long time and he's a good man. I'm angry at his inner circle who have not served him well and at times committed malpractice in their service. I'm frustrated at the family for not expanding the circle so there would be a truth teller or two in their midst. They created a perfect storm of an echo chamber and it's biting them in the ass. Scandal accelerationism. If you did not read my Substack, somebody find a link to my Substack article. Throw it in the comments. I'm not saying I'm great, but judge yourself. I said the only way that Democrats can move on from Joe Biden is to scandalize him. Is to accelerate the scandals around him and bring in any and all of them that have one common theme. The Biden family and his inner circle keep secrets. And we trusted them. They took advantage of our trust. Because otherwise, this is a scandal that leaks onto everybody. I still don't think that people are wrapping their heads around enough that this is not just something that America is going to forget. Democratic partisans are going to be excited if Joe Biden steps down and Kamala Harris or somebody else is the candidate because they will have a stronger candidate. But you got to realize that Joe Biden's age is now a national conversation where normies are paying attention to it. So if that's the case, and everything that you were told before, he's fine. Wait, what? He's not fine? How long has he not been fine? Who was the first person to know that he was not fine? What parts of the Joe Biden term has he been out to lunch on? Was he out to lunch on October 7th? We have American hostages in Gaza. Americans. That was the shit that got Jimmy Carter ran out of office for. That and inflation. And Joe's got that too. Is the coddling of an old man with advanced brain problems the reason why an American is in a Hamas closet somewhere in Gaza? Like, these are the questions that are going to happen. People are not wrapping their head around the idea that this is not contained. It is not containable. And it is going to be a scandal. It is a scandal. There's a reason why you're seeing some of these quotes of like, oh man, the family, the inner circle, the family. Because exactly what I said in that Substack. They are drawing a circle so they can't be blamed. So Kamala can't be blamed. So Pete can't be blamed. So everybody else rats off a sinking ship. And if this continues, you're going to see more leaks. X15, it's a soft scandal. No, it is not a soft scandal. It is not. It is a scandal. It is a for real scandal. And the only reason why we are not looking at it like one right now is because we have a sugar high of another electoral question that has a more pressing deadline. But the Republicans have been on the beach for the last week and a half. They're not going to be next week when they have America's attention. And you want to know what they're going to talk about? because you're already seeing these hashtags. Hashtag Kamala knew. Hashtag cover up. That's going to be the drumbeat. And you can say, well, it's a Republican saying it, but I think it's going to be America that believes it. Because how can you not? We are still waiting on the press conference to begin. It looks like it will apparently happen at the top of the hour, but we will see. No one has missed the thing. Is Blue Anon going to go mainstream the way that QAnon did? No, because I don't think there's anybody on the Republican side that wants to make them famous. Maybe somebody will. Maybe there will be the left really wanted to make QAnon famous because it reinforced all the scary elements of Donald Trump as an outsider. That, okay, well, sure, you can change the guard, but look what you're letting in with you. Where we go one, we go all. I don't know. Right now the Blue Anon stuff is it's a curiosity. It's the Mueller she wrote kind of stuff. Yeah, if Trump starts retweeting Mueller she wrote, then yeah. Other than the shunning of Biden, do you think that there would be any fallout within the DNC when Biden loses? You are going to see verbal violence within the Democratic caucus that you have never seen in your life. It is going to be Mad Max. Because you got a lot of warring factions, and there is nobody who has enough power. The only people that have power in that, that caucus is Obama and all the people that surrounded Obama that has like legacy power, but he's going to be blamed for Biden. Yeah, Fetterman's fighting with Pelosi. Those are the strange bedfellows. I mean, what a civil war. Do the Marvel Avengers Civil War poster. Joe Biden, AOC, John Fetterman on one side. Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, George Clooney on the other. I mean, not only have they attached themselves to Joe Biden, they've continued to say that this is the greatest presidency of all time. That's the line. At a certain point, you're going to have to downshift some of this, because the other big benefit you get from Joe Biden stepping down, if he does step down, by the way, that is the podium, is that you do get to reshuffle your priorities a little bit. You're not going to be able to do a lot of different stuff, but you will be able to do some. So, Kamala is somebody that I've always thought when you go back and look at when she's been the most electorally efficacious, it's been as a law and order liberal. If she comes in and says, hey, we're doing some different stuff on the border. Okay. Now, you have the ability to do that. Biden can't. Biden can only do what he's done on the border. This is livenowfox.com that has the 85% yes. I can only imagine that that is not a particularly representative study. Do we know what this press conference is supposed to be about? Yes. The press conference is about whether or not Joe Biden's brain works. This is a proof of life. I mean, unable to face Donald Trump without embarrassing himself, he will now face the Washington press corps. And in a general mood, all right, let's get into Democratic malpractice, okay? Number one, you do this press conference on Monday after the debate. You do it immediately. And you script the living hell out of it. You don't call on Peter Doocy. You you play all the hits. You have Joe and Mika in the front row. Like, you bring in every person. You have Camila Cabello ask a question about kids or something, right? Like, you do whatever you need. You script the living shit out of this thing, and you do it on Monday. So then at the very least, you can reassure all the Democrats that are panicking and say, hey, look, he stood up there for 20 minutes. He asked every question. And the Republicans are going to be like, well, you didn't ask any mean questions. You only asked nice questions. And the White House says, cry harder. Moving on. He had a bad debate. It's fine. We'll see we'll see in September. He had a cold. And you lied. You lied a lot. They didn't do that. They waited and metastasized. And, you know, there's a lot of this that's like, this isn't the crime. It's not the crime. Normally the saying goes, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. What's made Democrats panic is it's not the crime, it's the lack of cover-up. Fallen Shroud, I am using an integrated chat thing. By the way, Fallen Shroud, thank you so much for the gifts. Greatly appreciated. Thank you. We just got all of them yesterday. What if he steps down here? Joe Biden is not stepping down. I mean, period. He ain't. In no world is he stepping down. Is YouTube or Twitch better for me? Doesn't matter to me. Don't matter to me none. The LBJ Museum would be a poetic setting, which is why he's not going to do it there. He has a Lester Holt interview on Monday at the LBJ Museum in Austin. I will not be there because I'll be in Milwaukee covering the RNC. But great googly moogly. What if they just put his resignation on the teleprompter and they they Ron Burgundied his ass into into resigning? That would be amazing. We built the middle class from the bottom up, middle out. I'm resigning, effective immediately. My successor, Kamala Harris. I'm releasing all my delegates to her. We need to stand up for unions who built this country. That'd be amazing. We know he did not have a nap between this and the last event, unless they ran him right into a cot and put him down, because he just introduced President Volodymyr Zelensky as President Putin. Not great. Yeah, Zelensky said, I'm better. I mean, if your survival depended on Joe Biden, you'd sell his jokes too. You'd sell his jokes too. I would sell his jokes. If I were Volodymyr Zelensky, I would sell his jokes. Biden-Harris Twitter leaning into it. Posting the gaffe themselves. I love the channel, so I forgive you for forgetting to turn on Andrew Heaton's mic on the last We're Not Wrong podcast. That's only on the YouTube. If you listen to the podcast, the actual podcast, his mic is on. My mistake. I literally noticed it at the end of it, but I was watching the waveforms and they were coming in clean. So my bad on the YouTube of We're Not Wrong. Why is this on the NATO summit stage? Well, a lot of world leaders do press conferences at NATO. BBC did there was a press conference with Keir Starmer, their new prime minister. So that's just what a thing. We are after 7 p.m. We are edging into gremlin hours. I can't imagine what it's like to be on that campaign right now. You just got to be sweating blood, dude. Watching Joe Biden go out for a live press conference is got to be like betting on an 0-15 football team. Like, maybe you're hoping it'll go right, but you've seen a lot to think it might go very badly. I am not watching the AP. I am watching Fox Live. Live Now Fox, whatever that is, but they're carrying it. Imagine being a young 20s liberal arts graduate tied to a campaign, knowing that you have an ungodly student debt and he's your only hope. You know, I'm listening to this book about 1968. I want to read you guys something. This blew me away. All right. He was a great man who had grown too old. In chemistry, it's found that some very stable elements placed in proximity to other seemingly moribund elements can simultaneously produce explosions. Hidden within this bored, overstumped, complacent society were barely noticeable elements: a radicalized youth with a hopelessly old-fashioned geriatric leader, overpopulated universities, angry workers, and a sudden consumerism enthralling some and sickening others. Sharp differences between the generations, and perhaps even boredom itself, that when you put together could be explosive. That's about Charles de Gaulle in France in 1968. Corinne Jean-Pierre, along with the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, taking their seats. As you see, the press has now loaded into the room. There is Peter Doocy in the red tie. He will be somebody that all eyes are on, as he is Fox News's White House correspondent and usually the designated hard ass. Ed O'Keefe is CBS's White House correspondent, and he has also been animated lately with Corinne Jean-Pierre. An average human would break under the pressure faced by U.S. presidents. Not according to the movie Dave. Do you bet on Doocy being called? You have to call on him. You have to call on him. But then if I were the press secretary, I would call on him first. I would get the hardest question out of the way immediately, show you have no fear, and fight back. Here, the other problem for Biden, though, is that like when he fights back, he doesn't do it with humor. He gets mad, man. This dude gets angry. I mean, in the past, they have scripted out his first like 5 questions to friendly reporters. So I would expect that they probably will do the same here. Thank you to everybody who's here with us. Got a hell of a crowd here. Greatly appreciated. I saw on the internet today that Joe Biden could settle all of this with one perfectly executed backflip. So, keep that in mind. Chances he flubs a press name. Yes, he will be flubbing a press name. He will call somebody something. Donald Trump at Doral Country Club, a golf course, did challenge Joe Biden to a game of golf to see who's better. Extending what we now think of as one of the more lighthearted moments of that debate. At the time, it made everybody roll their eyes, but now it seems kind of quaint and fun. By the way, the Whispers. are that it is J.D. Vance as the vice president. Bergmentum petered out. A youth movement on the Republican ticket. That is the rumor. We've got A. Blinken, the Secretary of State, taking his seat next to Karine Jean-Pierre and Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. I can't believe both these men have jobs. I thought one of them was going to get fired after Afghanistan, but no, we're here. By the way, nobody got fired off the campaign. Oh, crap. Hold on, guys. I got to show you something. I got something. Hold on. I'll get it. The shirts? Yes. Good. Thank you. I would be curious about Vance. I mean, the comp with Vance is Nixon. Nixon in 1952. Young senator from a part of the country that has become more important for the party. And, he's going to be groomed under somebody that is an iconic force of will, an outsider. Oh, we might have a little wife action.
Yeah.
How you doing, wife?
Too pregnant.
I know you are very.
I'd like to resign
from pregnancy.
from pregnancy.
Well, you only have a couple. You only have a couple
resign.
more. You only have a couple more months. All right, hold on, guys.
Why hasn't this started yet?
Nobody knows. Did I only get one?
Oh, there's two, but they said the same thing, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, they do. All right. So I was talking to Michael Cohen on text, and we were going back and forth about campaign mistakes. And I was like, I think that them taking that early debate, considering what's happened and the fact that we're still in the middle of it, might be the worst campaign mistake in history, which made me immediately want, as a nerd, I needed to get a commemorative prize. If you remember, the video that Biden made where he said, Donald Trump, who wants to challenge me to debate, will make my day. Let's pick the dates, Donald. I'll debate you. And then said, I hear you're free on Wednesdays. At that point, joking about the fact that Donald Trump was in trial. That feels like 11 years ago. But they started selling free on Wednesdays t-shirt. And now I own two of them. I own two free on Wednesdays t-shirts. So at some point I'll do a giveaway. Because this is a commemorative t-shirt for the worst mistake in campaign history. Because even when they did it, I'm like, don't they realize that elections are on Tuesday? So if you lose, someone's going to tell you, yeah, good news, Joe, you'll be free on Wednesday. But yeah, so there we go. We have two of them. We will do a giveaway at some point. But I'm keeping one because it's amazing that somebody would say free on. I mean, no one even remembers that. Doesn't it feel like a billion years ago that Donald Trump was on trial? Biden should release trucker caps that say, listen, fat. Any special guests for the stream? Wife is here.
I'm
Hi,
here.
wife.
Hi. I'm a special guest. Slash t-shirt runner.
Yeah. 8 American flags at the NATO event. Well, it's the American president speaking. There's the American president seal. I don't think that's weird. Yeah, 2 guests. 2 guests for the price of 1.
Yeah. One's
You
a little
and-
quiet right
you
now,
and,
though.
You and Le Petit Hon.
Yeah, Le Petit Hon.
Le Petit Hon. Julia.
I've made so much progress on Le Petit Hon's nursery.
Oh my God. No, the nursery it looks amazing. It is like already Pinterest ready.
Spoilers, it's got geese in it.
It looks like we have people at the ready. Let's see if
Can I turn on the
yeah,
audio on the
if you
floor?
want turn on the floor audio.
Let me know when you have the audio on.
Yeah.
He essentially said hands-off approach, mano a mano. Of course, that was Trump being Trump. The Biden campaign did respond because he also asked Biden and dared Biden to play an 18-round hole of golf there. So you see that.
Let's get the old bird out of here. Come on. Let's get to flapping. 30 minutes late. I don't envy the ASL person to deal with Joe Biden. So there is a character that has become a regular source of amusement for the Ruthless podcast, which is a conservative-leaning podcast for those who don't listen. That, by the way, has been enraptured. It is just a giggle fest over the last 2 weeks. It is like a recording of several 12-year-old boys who found a bunch of old Playboys in the woods. Like, it is just ebullient. But one of the characters that they will bring up is Bracket Man, who has to, after Joe Biden speaks, this is real, after Joe Biden speaks, he has to put brackets in to say what Joe Biden really meant. So, yeah, I assume that all of the duty that falls onto ASL translator, it is what Bracket Man has to deal with in real time. That's a rough gig. My podcaster can do an impromptu stream for over an hour, no notes, and my president can't even show up to his own big boy presser. Well, in many ways, the big boy never left. They've consistently brought high quality food at competitive prices. Oh, he's coming out. Is this a little late?
And so that is, in recent memory, in modern American history, from what I can
Okay, so
remember,
we are a little late compared to some of
okay,
you.
We have Biden. Here he is.
We do have Biden. Let's take a listen to this. It's happening live.
We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success. It's especially momentous because it represented the 75th year, the most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. Attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence to be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February,
He is reading off a teleprompter right now.
some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself.
All right, whatever.
Many foreign policy experts thought, as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine.
All right, we're going to refresh it real quick. Oh, no. We got culvered.
Oh no.
$5.
No.
Thanks,
That's enough
Obama.
to make a difference in this election.
Kyiv still stands.
There we
And
go.
NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance.
This is fine for Biden now. He's coughing, which is not great.
My predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, do whatever the hell you want. In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said.
Okay, we're getting into
Well, I
some
made it
campaign
clear.
stuff.
A strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away.
He does
from Ukraine.
not
I
go
will keep
straight
NATO
down the
strong.
barrel. He does
exactly what
the
we
back
did.
and forth.
And exactly what we'll continue to do. Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than a political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer?
I
believe
hate
the American people
the
know.
idea that he's pinning this on NATO.
answer
Nobody
to all
actually
those
gives a
questions is
shit about
yes.
NATO, to be fair.
And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus
Like, people are
from
for
Truman
NATO, but
to
they don't
Reagan
actually
to
vote
me
because of NATO.
still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We're an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning,
A lot more of a speech
we had a
than I
great
was
economic
thinking.
report showing inflation is down. Overall,
Was that supposed to be a
prices fell
Q&A?
last month.
It will eventually.
Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have
All
fallen
right.
since the start
Foreign
of the year.
policy, pivot to
We're gonna keep
the
working to
economy.
take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy.
Do I think
including
Trump will
food
pull out
from
of NATO?
overseas,
No.
Vegetables and other necessities. And economists tell us
Didn't he
That
threaten
would
to do it, or
cost
am I
the average
misremembering?
American
No,
working family
he
another
said that we were getting ripped off by NATO
$2,500
because
a year
none of
to
our
tax
allies were paying
$2,500
the same
a
amount of
year.
money. And by the way, I think Jake
Second,
Sullivan wrote a thing this
purpose
week
to secure
saying the
the
exact
border,
same
southern
thing.
border is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7.
This is kind of like a mini
That
State of the
framework is
Union.
now agreed
I think
on
we're now
by both
seeing what their
Israel and
strategy
Hamas.
was, is like, what was our best
send my
moment? The
team
State
to
of the
the region.
Union. Let's do a
Hammer out
mini
the
State of
details.
the Union.
These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive. And I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions.
Here we go.
I'm given a list of people to call on here.
What the
Reuters,
fuck?
Jeff Mason.
Why would he say that? A list of people to call on?
Mr. President, your
Wow.
political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside.
Big smile. Good
Reuters is
smile.
reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president.
Uh-oh.
So I think she
Uh-oh.
was not qualified to be president.
Uh-oh.
So let's start there.
Wouldn't have picked Vice President
Number one.
Trump.
The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We got more work to finish. There's so much, we've made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million jobs. I mean, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down. And so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up
Foreign press.
Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, and the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. And officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky.
He does not see the problem
Five
with
other
this.
names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one.
I feel like it'd be
Sorry,
less of a
Nancy
news
Cordes.
point of him like
CBS.
misidentifying people.
Yeah.
If
Thank
all
you,
this
Mr.
other shit
President.
weren't going on.
You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Daddy Denham's, that this is a policy, but it usually happens with a little
I'm
more,
in this
more
for my
subterfuge.
I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16
Inflation
economic
went
Nobel
up,
laureates
and the debt went
said
up.
I've done a hell of a job. And under my plans so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people.
This is like power
working-class
pitch
people
Joe
need help.
Biden.
And so what happened is I decided
This is
to
Scranton
implement-
Joe.
was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Find me an economist, a mainstream economist who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic, doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase. Corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes.
Federal rent control?
Because we're going to continue to grow this economy.
Is that
By
a
the way,
thing?
I know.
Is he
remember how
pushing
I
for
got so
federal rent
roundly
control?
Criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better. And we talk about how, for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Europe, to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world, and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's been over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing.
This is the
Just
same
coming from
exact
me.
debate script that he didn't execute.
None of you thought that would happen.
Yeah.
None of you thought that would happen.
Very
But it's happening.
prickly. It's prickly, but this is not terrible.
It's going to grow economies. All through, and by the way, red states and blue states. Matter of fact, there's as much in red states as in blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fair. Like I said,
If it's boring, he
my
wins.
standpoint,
Let's point that out. If it's
when
boring,
the
he
middle class
wins.
does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that
Uh-oh. Follow
Vice
up.
President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Domestic.
President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have.
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look,
Oh. Bedtime
what I said
question.
was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look.
He really loves
he's
that
done
line. He
virtually
keeps
nothing.
trying to go back to it.
And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to, roughly 20 major events. Some with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. In the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about.
The follow-up I would love
And
is,
by the way, even with that,
which of the 2 events that he traveled for would he not do?
But they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway, I'm sorry, Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons.
All right. So
saying
the
that,
first question that comes in
public
that's
reports
not
saying
about
that
his
Ukraine
candidacy.
cannot win the
We got
war
what,
unless
5
those
in
limitations are
that
lifted.
were all
Are you
about his fitness?
reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky, asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten him more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. What do I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
What?
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
Oh,
I'm well.
Foreign.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in
No one has
Poland
asked him about
across
taking a
Europe
cognitive test yet.
are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine.
All right, so this is a softball.
To give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster.
Leads to a question: which leaders?
I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, as you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. No, that's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office, I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon?
What is happening now?
And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is significant. And they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall whether he said it public in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind it being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability.
I think we're definitely going over for the record.
To dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. And we're able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. And we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. Where's that?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place.
I don't think Ducey's getting called.
2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time
Fox
ago.
News' White House
so I'd be
correspondent.
interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now, you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do. What they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating them, they're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves, they're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that she believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we have to make clear. China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe. And
This is something he was definitely
Russia
prepped for.
And dealing with Ukraine. And so we, for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well.
Remember, if it's boring, he's winning.
You have to
And
get
right now it's
51%
boring.
Chinese owner.
He's winning.
You have to make sure that you do by their rules, and you don't have the authority, and that you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past.
With them
looking to
giving
figure
Biden a
out
list of
how
questions,
they
will
can
there
have
be
impact.
rumors of pre-vetting? Yes. Yes.
That impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public. And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them in, as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity.
Joe is putting my wife
to
to
provide
sleep.
for weapons and the ability
Call me
to.
sleepy wife.
It came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new.
By the way, the White House will take boring.
From vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, that's what Russia's trying to figure out, that they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to, the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was a discussion as well.
I'm not sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look,
Instant.
like I said,
Next question.
I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. And but there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand that a generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea...
You need to change your behavior, young man.
Putin's got a problem.
Me.
First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk.
The question was
including
how he
Putin
will
calling
deal
me
with
wanting
Xi
to
and
talk.
Putin as he ages.
Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anybody else has. We just put together with, today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on a group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target, and I don't take it lightly.
You, sir?
Sam from NPR.
Oh, NPR. The Pitbulls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement, the answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the king of
Well,
Jordan.
he got that one right this time.
I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here come here all the time and heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her.
Tell him the Golda Meir story.
Her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me.
Joey's in his bag.
I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel in the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port reattached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on, because it was not in our, no one's
Once
ever
we got bin Laden,
that country.
we'd already
I've
been in
over every
Afghanistan for like
inch of
10
that, not
years.
every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north. I said, don't make the same mistake we made. Don't think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular.
Just another pilot. Is this going to work?
So
yes.
There's a lot of moving parts. You just have to keep
He's not falling apart. He's boring, which means he's not awful.
Toward a ceasefire.
This does not do anything but prolong this.
Look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway,
candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited.
That's interesting. So he's saying that he did mean a bridge candidate was that he was only going to serve one term.
I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth. Most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation
Jesus
passed.
Christ, this guy.
And what I realized was
he certainly thinks
long
things
time
are
in the
awesome.
Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom on how to deal with the Congress, to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform your...
Am I using that way, you say?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see
Watch.
Them,
He loves saying
for
watch.
the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway. And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events from Wisconsin to North Carolina, to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And here, look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters, I forget exactly how many, I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off, but we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized, we're moving, and that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library I'm going to be going around,
Joe, it's Monday,
making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around, more children.
Oh, Jesus.
Are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. We got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical.
That was the
observing.
Palpatine speech with the
Bulk
like.
of the press. What the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy's not an issue. Democracy's not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously.
This is part of
Do you
why he
think our
gives himself
democracy
credit
is
for
under
2022,
siege
by the way.
Based on this court? Do you think democracy is under
midterms.
siege based on Project 2025?
Oh,
Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service? Eliminate the Department of Education? Make sure, I mean, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why I didn't, you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist.
Jesus.
In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day on my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff, I said, I'm going to go to South Korea. We're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it. Creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's
age ain't nothing but a number, folks.
that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out. I hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So I am not opposed if my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia?
Oh, boo! Ask another question about why we give a shit.
If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Oh, here we go.
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
They vote for someone else?
Sure. Look. I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time.
He's gone back to that a few times.
I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very at least a purple, it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is, I understand the self-interest of a candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days?
Poll
I think
denialism.
there's polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hasn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day. So
It ain't 1960, dude.
but I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have any want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
This was
No,
reported
unless
on
they
by
came
the
back
New York
and
Times.
said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that. Okay. Thank you.
This ends tonight's press conference.
Oh, is he going to call? Is he going to call? Is he going to call? Swashbuckle him, Joe. Corinne.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's. Thank you, everybody.
I mean, there's the ad. There's the ad. You just run that.
All right.
And there we go. That's the game.
You should play this right before we go to sleep, so I can fall asleep.
I know. It was very boring, but again, a boring is good for Joe Biden right now. Disaster is bad. Boring is good. I believe that this does help him save his presidency. I don't think that it helps him win the election. Oh, shit, look at this. Look at our boy. Look.
Mine is
That's our boy, Tom Lobianco.
defiant, at times
24
angry,
sight.
that kind of cantankerous.
He's on this
chip
live
his
stream.
shoulder
Look at
vibe.
that.
We've
We
seen
love to see
before,
it.
no doubt.
Yeah.
But he is staying the course.
All right, he was texting me throughout that, so if he says anything lying, I'll bust him on it because he was in the group chat. Look, here's the deal.
Anyway,
it was about as manicured as you could get. It will not assuage anybody who. Let me take a picture and put it in the group chat. Here we go. Hold on.
don't distract him.
I know.
He's on TV.
Look who it is. Joe Biden did himself a favor in stopping the idea that he was always going to be like he was during the debate. He was better than he was during the debate. He's not going to shake the fact that that was manicured. It was very manicured. They went to friendly reporters that while they asked tough questions, they didn't ask particularly pointed questions, and they gave him a lot of stuff that was in his wheelhouse. Joe Biden likes to talk about foreign policy. He really likes to talk about foreign policy. So, if anything, what I saw was a man who saved his presidency and may well be on his way to lose this election in a landslide. There's a lot of really, really, really weird things. If we're just going to look at him like a candidate, he talks about the state of America as if 80% of Americans believe we're on the right track. We're not. We're not. Let me get Tom's mug off here. I mean, like let's look right track, wrong track, polling. This is where it stands right now. So if you're crafting a political strategy, right now, 21% of Americans believe we are on the right track. 70% of Americans believe we are on the wrong track. And how far does this go? That's 2023. Can we see any further? No. All right. So this is recently. And it's getting worse. So at the very least, what you need to do is craft a message that understands where America is. The way that Joe Biden talks about America, everything's awesome. And for some people, for 21.7% of America, that's true. It will ring true to them. But for 70% of America, hearing the president talk about how everything's awesome and he's the best president and nobody would be able to do anything nearly as good as he did, I mean, I don't think it lands. So congratulations to the White House. I do think that they did a good job of trying to stem the tide of Joe Biden needs to get out or resign. I don't believe he did himself any favors as a candidate. And the Vice President Trump flub, his answer of listen to him, like those are ready-made ads. Otherwise, it was boring. I mean, it really depends on what you wanted out of this. I think the White House will take this as a win. They will take it. Because I do think that there will be less ferocity to come after him tomorrow than there was today. I don't think that he is anywhere close to winning this race right now. Maybe that changes. Maybe the polls tighten. But there are some things that I heard that make me very concerned about his understanding of where this race is and how people perceive his presidency. You know, say what you will about Donald Trump, but when Donald Trump does the your favorite president routine, there's a little element of like a wink and a nod that a lot of people hate him. So it's an unironic thing to his fans, but it's a little like twist to people who hate him. But he is acknowledging the idea that he has people that hate him. He's very cognizant of the people that hate him. And I don't see any of that messaging with Joe Biden at all, whatsoever. At some point, people, even if they eventually switch him out, people will have such a bad aftertaste with this whole party. He ain't going nowhere. He ain't going nowhere.
I thought he said he was going somewhere.
He ain't going nowhere. He ain't going nowhere.
Where's he going?
You're gonna have to get a wrecking ball to get me out of here. I'm not fucking leaving. Yeah, guys. Yeah, it's yeah. You want to know? Let's see what some of the commentariat class is saying here. Let's go to the old Xaroo. Okay. Apparently, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee is saying that Joe Biden should step down. This is Jim Himes. President Biden is a remarkable leader of unparalleled public service, undeniable achievement, and unconditional patriotism. His administration has created historic job growth, but people over politics by cutting healthcare costs, passing gun safety reforms, rebuilding our infrastructure, and restoring a brutally divided nation's sense of decency. It has been the honor of my career to work with him. It is because of those traits and consideration of that legacy that I hope President Biden will step away from the presidential campaign. That is the weird hokey pokey that is happening right now.
Okay, your daughter's hungry. I'm gonna go.
Okay. Comfortably Smug is live here on Twitter. Smart strategist to me following the press conference. This is Amy Parnes. Not sure anything changes. He lives to fight another day. I am going to retweet that because I agree with that. Yeah, Bridget Fetisi, 4 more months. I think that is that's legitimate. Ari Fleischer, former press secretary for George W. Bush. Biden had a good enough night that the D's will not go full public meltdown, at least tonight. He bought himself more time, which probably is upsetting a lot of Democrats who think that he is the weakest candidate versus Trump. The D's are in a real jam. All right. You know, a Feist here in the chat, in our chat, says he did not do well. And then the gunner's dream, but he didn't die. And that's basically the tale of this. The tale of this is he didn't die. He didn't totally melt down. He had a couple gaffes, but he got through them. It's a C+. Now, do you want your candidate to be delivering C+ performances? No. You want him at a B+, you want him at an A. This is when you want people to look at that dude and say, that's my president. But a C+ when you've been churning out Fs, well, it looks pretty good. It stops the bleeding. The trend line is still downward, Ren Igu. Of his reelection chances, yes. I don't think that there's anything that was in there today that makes an average voter, the voter he needs to win over, look at him and say, yes, I want to vote for him. He was slow. He was meandering. He was stammering. You're in a real pickle when you're going to get credit, including from pundits like me, for talking for 35 minutes when it was at times incomprehensible. But at least you did it. It was, again, C-level political mushmouth. Not great, but it's not we finally beat Medicare. The larger problem that I think anybody who's looking at this from an educated perspective in terms of politics will say is it was manicured. If what you wanted was him to take a real jumping and yelling, hooting and hollering press conference, he didn't do it. He went to, 8 people that were pre-vetted, that they knew the questions and they knew would be nice. They didn't go to a Peter Doocy. You didn't get that kick in the teeth right out of the gun. I think that's what some people want. I don't think he can do it. 12 reporters was the final total. What do y'all think of a push for a Biden impeachment? I mean, I think it is now. All right, so here, let's take a look at what happens now. Now, the Republicans go on offense because I do think that some of this is going to die down from the Democrats. And guess what? 2 weeks into this story, remember, it was 2 weeks ago the debate happened. 2 weeks ago, we were here doing the debate. So 2 weeks into this debate story, we're now going to get the full brunt of the Republicans. And it's going to be unrelenting for 4 days. Now, the impeachment part of it is going to be interesting if the Republicans go down that road, because I don't think that the impeachment will be like the Hunter or the Trump Ukraine thing, mostly because you had to explain that to America. I remember, I forget who I was with, but I was with somebody in Iowa for the caucus. And the Ukraine impeachment had just happened. And I was like, if anybody in America remembers the name Lev Parnas, who was, at that moment, somebody that everybody knew the name of, in 2 weeks, I'll be shocked. And he was like, oh, no, it's going to be the defining story of the election. It wasn't. Because anything that you have to explain to the American people, you are almost admitting that they don't care about. Campaigns are not about explaining new things. They're about revealing a truth that you always knew. And finally, somebody is able to say it. It's the reason why I don't like Project 2025 as a campaign strategy. Because whoever won an election by recommending the American people read a 900-page book? Like, the success rate on politicians who win by telling people to read the most popular book of all time, the Bible, is like 45%. You're going to tell people, hey, go read this 900-page policy wonk drivel. Nobody's going to do it. Pick out the things that are the worst parts of Project 2025 and make those your points. Because if you're explaining, you're losing. If you're explaining a new thing. So going back to the impeachment, if there is an impeachment, then it will be more resonant because everyone in America knows that Joe Biden might be dangerously old, if not have Parkinson's. Like, that's not, Jamie Comer doesn't need to explain the 50 different Biden family LLCs, you know? That is what it is. All right. So those are my thoughts. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Robert Tingstrom, campaign should be the opposite of what you say. You are saying people are stupid. They are doing that. No, I'm not saying people are stupid. I'm saying that when you're persuading anybody on anything, if you're persuading someone you have a crush on to go on a date with you, if you are trying to get them to buy Coke instead of Pepsi, if you're trying to get somebody to be, to vote for president, you don't lecture them. You find common ground with them. It's relatability. It's aspiration. It's human nature. Like, not to get into a Don Draper Mad Men monologue, but like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, man, he yearns. But the one thing that a man can't recover is his past. The carousel. Moving slowly, bringing memories you once thought were long gone. Like, finding that one little part of you that really explodes. Democrats found that with Trump and democracy and authoritarianism. You had a long history of demonization and polarization of political parties. Trump was the right kind of person that Democrats could be awakened by saying that an authoritarian is going to ruin everything. Combine that with he's your mean boss, he's the asshole who gets the job over a better qualified woman, everything, right? There's a reason why that supernovaed the way that it did, and it wasn't because anybody explained anything, it's because everybody already knew it. Building those bridges, those persuasive bridges, are the hallmarks of good campaigns, and the absence of them are the mark of bad campaigns. And so what I heard today from a campaign perspective is Joe Biden saying the economy is amazing, foreign policy has never been better, I have been the greatest person on legislation since LBJ or maybe before, so LBJ in the mud, Civil Rights Act in the mud, Great Society. Have you heard of the Inflation Reduction Act? And that he's the only person who can beat Donald Trump. Everything's great. Everything's awesome. But the polls don't count. And also, people haven't even paid attention yet. They don't pay attention until after Labor Day. Like, that sounds like he's doing a lot of explaining and not a lot of meeting America where they are. Now, Trump comes from the other perspective. He says Joe Biden's the worst president of all time. Well, by approval ratings, Joe Biden is lower than most presidents of the lifetimes of the people that are living right now. So is it hyperbole? Is it a demonization? Of course. Is it closer to true than everything's awesome? Unless you're one of those 20%, and then you do think everything's awesome, the country is on the right track. Well, yeah, Biden, Trump. I mean, Joe did such a good, I think Joe did his goodest job. That's my summation. He did his goodest job. Okay. That's it. Thank you guys for joining us. If you are new to this channel, we go live in the mornings on Monday, Wednesday, Friday when I'm not juggling, which I was doing on Wednesday. The podcast is called Politics, Politics, Politics. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe, like and subscribe on YouTube. We will be live streaming from the convention. I'm going to be at the RNC. We will be live streaming from there. I don't know whether we're going to be in the convention or we will live stream the programming from the Airbnb that we have. But we will live stream. We will do our best to live stream. And we will definitely be covering the speeches. But, yeah. What day is the convention? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 4 days of chock-a-block RNC coverage. What I would imagine is going to be an ebullient Republican convention. Because I know the Trump campaign believes that Joe Biden is a gift. That was a quote from, I forget if it was Susie Wiles or Chris LaCivita. But Joe Biden is a gift. And I think Joe Biden is going to make it to the convention now. RNC predictions. I still think Burgum is the VP. I don't know where the Vance talk came from today, but I still think it's Burgum. We'll find out. Okay, that's it. Till next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss